Hello and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran.
I'm Deshaun Vasquez.
And today we are two nerds figuring out what's gonna fit on your warp shelf. Our warp shelf. The collective warp shelf. And we love usually talking film. We love usually just talking about movies because we're big movie guys. You know, like that's what we love. That's our bread and butter. That's what we do. But we are also huge gamers. And Deshaun pointed out before the recording that we don't often play a game at the same time and then beat it at a relatively same window.
Yeah.
So this is a very rare occasion where Tears of the Kingdom has brought the Warp Shelf together to talk about video games, baby.
Because, what even was the last, video game episode we talked about? Was it Sword and Shield?
It might be Sword and Shield because we were so all right.
Not counting
No,
stuff.
we had Arceus. We had
that's true. Yeah.
So
I was going to say not counting episodes that talk about games in extension, like when we did the Scott Pilgrim episode.
Exactly. Or our yearly wrap-ups where we talk about all the games we talked about, we played this year. This, talking about games we played all this year, short, guys, spoiler for this whole thing. I fucking love this game. I love this game. This is my favorite game of the year. I don't care what you say. I don't care if you think this is some DLC, if you think this is not a full effort from Nintendo by being like, "Oh, they just used the same setting." You're like, "Oh, do you not Look, we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it.
I want to just get straight into that immediately because that's the most prevalent complaint that I see when people are I won't say grasping for straws, but close.
Yes.
The thing is, it's about 70% you're wrong, 30% I get it.
Yes. I totally understand.
I get on paper why this looks more like an expandalone than a full-on sequel, but we also need to talk about the way gaming has shifted and the way we handle follow-ups like this.
Yes.
Because if you want to use that same argument, you could argue that something like Super Mario The Lost Levels, which was Super Mario Brothers 2 in Japan, might as well have been an expansion or DLC because it's just the same thing with extra stages. And then if you look it's really just slightly changing some things, adding to the material with a different story, but with the exact same settings. It's by that definition, in any other medium, that would be a fucking sequel.
Yeah, you're
to me, the difference
and I love people being like, "Oh, well, Majora's Mask made completely new levels for their sequel," and you're just like, "Hey, guess what? They used the same engine and the same things that they made in Ocarina of Time. They just completely rearranged it to make it sorry, it starts with a T. What's the land in Majora's Mask? Termina. Thank you. It's one of those things where you're like, I understand what you think you're saying, where you're just like, oh man, they made a completely different game. You're like, did they? Let's take a look at Majora's Mask. You know, they took the same assets. And
Majora's
made new
Mask,
things.
by today's standards, would be considered an expandalone. Where I think of something like Horizon: The Lost Wilds DLC. It's just here's this whole new area that you weren't able to go to before, or Ghost of Tsushima, where it's the Icky Island DLC. You're just here's this whole ass other story from this island that was never accessible before.
Or
it's a completely
Xenoblade,
different land with a different story, but that's still considered an expansion, not a follow-up.
Right, a Xenoblade 2 where it's expansion where it was just oh, here's another 40 hours, baby, and you're just what?
Yeah.
What?
I think the difference here is expansions tend to be limited because they can't really progress the story as much because it's not meant to be a full-on follow-up in the same way that is how I feel about Spider-Man Miles Morales. That's on the cusp of solo game but mostly expand alone because it's not really Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, it's not really Spider-Man 2, but I feel that's a great example. I feel that's a great example because it's using a lot of people were talking about Miles in comparison to this game, because they're like, wow, they did completely change the game, but using the same levels, like with Miles, and you're just like, that makes sense, but that's shortchanging what Tears of the Kingdom is going here.
And also,
so
and also at its simplest, like, expansions either lower the scale because they have to be shorter, or they keep the same scale because they're not meant to be a true follow-up. Tears of the Kingdom expands the scale.
Yes, and that's why I don't like those arguments of saying it's just an expansion or it's just a DLC, is because I put 135 hours before I decided to beat the shit out of Ganon, and I definitely could have beat him sooner, but there was I was having so much fun and just doing shit. And I know you put in 150 hours before you decided to kick the shit out of Ganon, and like and that's what I'm saying, is that's not an expansion. That's not DLC. Nobody is doing 150 hours in a fucking expansion.
Yeah, like, what expansion's 150 hours outside of, like, MMOs or something?
Right?
Like, what are
You're
you
just like,
investing in?
What are we talking about here? This is a lengthy game. I still have so much more to do. I got the 100% tracker afterward, and they were like, you're only 60% through the game, and I was like, Jesus Christ, to 60%, to 100% completion, and I was like, I'll come back.
I wasn't gonna, like, complete it. I did what I did for Breath of the Wild, which is like, I'm gonna do all the shrines and beat the goddamn game. I'm not collecting the Korok seeds. Kiss my ass.
I did over 100 of the shrines, and did over 100 of the underground, which was my favorite part of the game. We'll get into that. But like, and then I maxed out so many outfits, because that's what I loved about this game, that somehow they just kind of did a little bit better than Breath of the Wild and got me really hooked on it. Was just improving outfits, getting stuff for outfits, and leveling Link up. I just spent most of the game making this game Legend of the Drip, Tears of the Haters, baby, because I was dripping all game, baby.
Which is ironic, because
I was looking fresh.
Which is ironic that you didn't finish all the shrines, because you get a new outfit just by doing that.
I know, it's the two pieces of outfit I don't have. I don't have the Majora's Mask, and I don't have that the finishing the shrines. Everything else I got in the game. That was absolutely my favorite part of this game, was the going out into the unknown and kind of like finding and obtaining weird outfits and leveling them up and killing enemies in a very Monster Hunter-y way, where you're like, oh, I need to kill this to make that type of outfit. Like I need electric keys to make this electric outfit. And I really enjoyed that, and makes it so that way it is very even more replayable to me than Breath of the Wild, which, to be fair, I put 100 hours into Breath of the Wild. I'm putting 135, I think maybe more, if I'm just going to go back and kick the shit out of some monsters in Tears of the Kingdom, because this has, I feel like, a lot more legs than its predecessor. I liked Breath of the Wild. I like Breath of the Wild a lot. But we talked about the faults before, and there is problems. Go ahead.
Here's my thing, like, Breath of the Wild has basically taken Ocarina of Time's place as, like, an inherently flawless gem that no one can criticize,
which both have flaws,
which has become just as annoying as that fucking discourse prior to Breath of the Wild. But, like, I had a really good time with Breath of the Wild, but even then, it was just like, if this was so flawless, then why is Tears of the Kingdom fixing so many problems I had with it? It's just like, it's as good as Breath of the Wild is. I always take umbrage with people being like, this is the best open world game ever made. Just like, what open world games have you played? Because this falls into a lot of the same traps that they did when this genre, like, first started to boom.
Mm-hmm. And
it doesn't get a pass just because it's the first time Nintendo did it.
I think that I was definitely running out of steam at the end of my Breath of the Wild playthrough, and I definitely have more steam in the tank for keeping playing this game beyond just beating it, you know?
And
I think that says something about this game for being an open world game, is that a lot of open world games, you just kind of are like, okay, I got the stuff, I collect extra stuff, but like, I'm going to beat the story, I'm going to get out. And like, there's a lot here that makes you want to go back and keep playing and keep exploring and keep beating. And I think that's really cool, you know, like for people who love this game, you know, like it's like there's so much to love here.
Yeah. With like, I have a whole notes for like, here's my beef with Breath of the Wild.
Deshaun's getting up the notes. He's like, he's like, hey, let me get my essay.
And this is shit I was
Breath
talking about even when the game was at the height of its popularity, like when it just came out. Just like, one, the biggest trap you can fall into with an open world game is repetition.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an open world game, the thing is always held together by fucking band-aids. So you need to find a way to hide that. A lot of the times what you end up trading for that is just like, yeah, the world's so big, but enemy variety is not that interesting. The assets are often repeated, and they just find a way to hide it. In this case, it definitely hides like its lack of visual fidelity with cell shading very well.
Very well.
Very well.
Very well. Now,
but, you know.
Now, my thing and my hot take on Tears of the Kingdom
I'm not done.
Okay, he's got his hot take. Okay, he's keeps going on his
hot
take.
just while keeping on Breath of the Wild so I can get this all out.
Go ahead.
Because a lot of this stuff is addressed in Tears of the Kingdom, and that'll make it a good segue. Like, okay. Enemy variety, very sparse. Like, it boils down to like the same like 5 or 6 enemies over and over and over again. Weapon durability, weapon durability was obnoxious the entire time. I don't care how big of a weapon selection you had in Breath of the Wild. That shit was so annoying.
So obnoxious. Because you had to keep just going. You had to keep farming, basically.
And by extension, it leads to the worst Master Sword ever.
Yeah. And I feel like we'll get into it. We'll get into it. Keep going.
Everything has like a counter
Everything's
argument
got something.
In Tears of the Kingdom. Shrines do not make up for lack of full-on temples, as fun as they are, and the divine beasts are a poor replacement. And I felt like a lot of the shrine designs in the first game were way too simplistic, and a good chunk of them relied way too much on fucking motion controls. Calamity Ganon has no real presence. He's a cool design, but that's about it. I get the impetus to like go back to basics.
Yeah, where you're just like, hey, you don't run into Ganon until you're at the end of the game, and you kick this guy's
Ganon,
ass.
not like, Ganondorf. You get like the monstrous like pig monster. And Breath of the Wild's whole conceit is like going back to that original idea for the OG game on the NES. It's just like, this is, the possibilities are endless. This is open. This is all about you going out into the world and figuring it out.
You have the choice to do this in any order you want to do it.
Yeah,
you know?
we had moved away from that as the games got more and more linear.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like the Breath of the Wild did that beautifully. I think it captures the old feel in a great way. And we're going to talk... I feel like we have to rebuttal every single one of these for Tears of the Kingdom. So yeah, I feel like I either we talk about it now or you just keep going.
Yeah, we might as well just like draw the through line. Repetitive assets. In Tears of the Kingdom, enemy variety is much better.
Much better. I enjoy the enemy variety here to a huge degree. Now, okay, so before we start this, my hot take is that I played Elden Ring before this, and I think Elden Ring's one of the best open world RPGs of all time. It's amazing. But basically, I think what happened here is that they will look at, I think, Breath of the Wild devs were looking at Elden Ring and being like, that's pretty fucking cool. You know, for a lot of this shit, especially for the cave systems and like going down deep. And I feel like that helps in variety in a huge way.
I would say potentially, but unlikely, given like the development overlap for these two. And given how little these guys would have seen of Elden Ring before they were like in the thick of it.
But I feel like it has a different feel going underground, because Breath of the Wild has going underground and there's like things underground, but like I feel like it happens so much more often. They're just everywhere on in Tears of the Kingdom. There's so much more to explore and find in every inch of the land. And I feel like that's the number one thing about the repeated assets, that they sort of, it feels the same as Elden Ring. That's the reason why I have to bring it up. It might not be stealing or taking influence, but it definitely feels the same, where they understood that every inch of this has to, it's game design, you know, like if you're going to be open world, then every inch of it has to have something for you to do, to find, to look for, or leading you towards those things. It's all has to keep telling a story instead of just being open and letting you be like, whoa, another open field, which is what happens often in Breath of the Wild, where you're like, a beautiful field, thank you.
Yeah,
which
it's
you're like,
funny
it is gorgeous, but
it's funny that the same criticism for like a Hyrule Field equivalent comes up every single time ever since Ocarina of Time. Just like, yeah, Hyrule Field is pretty, but it's empty and there's nothing to do. You fucking fast forward to Twilight Princess. Yeah, Hyrule Field in this is cool and it's open, but there's empty and it's nothing to do. Breath of the Wild is just like, yeah, it's cool and it's beautiful, but there's empty and nothing to do.
And here they're just like, we're gonna launch you into the sky, and you can find the things floating above Hyrule Field. Oh wait, there's also shit below. You know, like that's the best part about this game, is that every bit of it has layers. It's not only game design on the surface layer, but we have underground and above ground, and that's where I feel like the whole game can't be called DLC or an expansion, because you completely changed, as a concept of this game, completely changed the landscape of Hyrule.
Yeah.
So yes, you have Hyrule again, but now you have a complete underground, which does not conform to Hyrule mostly. It is almost the inverse of Hyrule, so it looks completely different most of the time. And then you have the Sky Islands, which are completely disconnected and free, so you're not like feeling the repetitiveness of like, oh, okay, I've already climbed up this mountain in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, just the double whammy of
a lot more to it.
The sky and the depths add so much, especially given that like anytime this game was advertised, they didn't really focus on anything in the depths. Like they mostly were just like, oh, sky shit. They didn't really talk. They didn't really showcase the depths. So that was like actually a pleasant surprise.
I think they wanted the moment that we all had, where we went into the depths and we were like, why does it keep going? Yeah, why does it keep going? Why did the music change? Like why did it change? And I think that's another thing to point out here, is that I think Breath of the Wild has great music. Tears of the Kingdom music, though, God damn, my man, God damn, I love the music in this game. God damn, I love the music in this game, and going into the depths is one of my favorite themes that it does. And of course, all the boss fights actually have music that I want to like. That makes me want to kick in a door. Like you absolutely just some music that you hear and you're just like, I'm ready to kick down fuck door. Like
basically how I live my entire life, Frank.
Yeah, but like
I get all my music from like games and shit. I need it's almost narrative the same context.
It's the same feeling as Doom's soundtrack, where you hear it and you're just like, I could rip a demon apart myself. Let's fucking go. Like when you hear the Rito Temple's theme for the boss, I forget what his name is, but that boss's theme is one of the best themes in Legend of Zelda history, which is a long line of fantastic music. I love the music of Legend of Zelda. It plays in my head constantly. It was one of my favorite aspects of this game, is that every time Link cooks, he sings a theme from some other Zelda game. Just like me, every time I'm doing something mundane, I'm singing something from Legend of Zelda, And I was like, he's like me for real. He's like me for real. He's just like me. See?
I do feel like One of my concerns from for Zelda going forward, though, given you were able to mix things up enough by adding the sky and adding the depths. For a third game, especially since they're like, oh, the open world thing is here to stay. I'm like, all right, I have some concerns there. You might want to move to a wholly new location because doing this version of Hyrule a third time is going to be a problem.
I think they will. I think they can't. I think they know they've kind of used every inch of this map, and I think that's the really cool part about this. I think the number one thing that people are missing about this game, that I think makes this game beautiful, is there's a few games that just kind of give you the dev tools. You know, they go, hey, you like that previous game. My examples are Disgaea 5 to Disgaea 6, is that they go, oh, wow, we really perfected the formula for our game. Or you could say Monster Hunter to the new Monster Hunter on Switch, Monster Hunter Rise. It's just like a perfection of the whole formula. And they kind of like give you the dev tools with it. Is that they go, okay, that was cool. Now let's give you complete access to everything so you can do this game however you please. And that's what this game is basically doing, is that you can beat Tears of the Kingdom any way you fucking want to. There is literally no right way to play this fucking game. Like, there's a lot of walkthroughs. A lot of walkthroughs are talking smoke, baby. I can do that shit so much faster and so much better with large bridge supremacy, by the way, which I believe in exclusively, is that a lot of things I can solve with just a large bridge.
It shocked me just like how unlimited the fuse mechanic was, because I was testing it. I'm like, anytime a mechanic like this is introduced in the game, I'm just like, people are going to break this. So just seeing fuse is like, I can still fuse stuff. This is a huge construct that I'm making, and they still haven't I don't seem to have a limit as to how many items I can fuse together. So like, couple that with Ascend, I'm like, oh, this game's going to get fucking broken in half.
Yep, and it has. I mean, I absolutely have a group with some of my favorite Gunpla people, XXL, New Type, Mean Mug, and Mecha Mommy, and they basically we just send Tears of the Kingdom memes back and forth, but like most of them are just insane clips of people making the craziest shit in this game, you know, like absolutely insane shit. I try to send you as much as I can, Deshaun. From that chat, I'm always just like, that shit's ridiculous. And that's basically it, is that they kind of were just like, do as you please, you know, like, and a lot of them, even the labyrinths, did you do the labyrinths?
Yeah, I did
I solved those so quick, not the way they probably wanted me to, you know, like there was a lot of shit like that where you were just like, I don't think they wanted me to do that, but I did it. And I ain't mad about it. You know,
I definitely discovered like the Spirit Temple way too fast. Just like, oh, I guess this is here, but I can't access it yet. Oh, this is definitely story based. I'll come back.
Do you want to hear my crazy, like, I was just exploring and I didn't realize what was going on? Is I was like 60 hours into the game and I'm like, there's a hole underneath Hyrule Castle. Let me go down there. And I go all the way down and I'm like fighting my way through. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of tough stuff in this cave. This is wild. This is pretty cool that they have this kind of hidden under the Hyrule Castle. That's kind of like a nice touch. And then all of a sudden I get to a point and they're like, the sages can't help you here. And you're like, I was like, where the fuck am I? I want my mom. And I basically got so far that when I zapped myself out, but I got so far down there that when it came to the point where I was like, oh, they were like, do the fifth stage, and I finished the fifth stage, I had completed all the find Princess Zelda, find Ganondorf, find, you know, like, where find all this. It was all done in a second, and I had basically completed a bunch of the end game stuff super early, like
Yeah.
60 hours in, because I by an accident just explored a little too far into Hyrule Castle
Basically,
depths.
I never thought to like dive into the hole immediately because it was just like that doesn't look good. And then when I discovered the depths later on, it's just like, oh, the depths is a thing. I immediately clocked. I'm like, oh, hole underneath Hyrule's where Endgame's gonna take place.
Yeah. I don't know why it never clicked to me. I was just kind of like, wow, this is a nice like touch, because obviously the fight will be in Hyrule Castle, not below it. And then I was like, I was wrong. Turn back. Mommy, please help me. But I did love that. I think that's one of the cool things about this game is that, again, like Breath of the Wild, you could just walk into the end if you wanted to. I don't know if you could.
Did you fill the entire map of the depths up?
I didn't, but I was very, very close. I did spend a lot of time doing it because I did love fighting the Frogs and I basically loved all the
Frogs
giant.
Fucking terrified me when I first ran into one. I'm like, what the hell is that?
I know. I saw it moving in the dark one time, and I was like, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? But that's what I mean by enemy variety, though, to bring it back to your list, is that that fun of like walking around the depths and seeing the different beasts that are down there, the harder fights that are down there. Basically, it's like a whole different level to the game. If you didn't have to do it. But it's like definitely a huge part of the game and adds so much to it.
It's essentially the Dark World equivalent. Like most Zelda games have this. You have like the actual Dark World. You have like the Twilight Realm and Twilight Princess. You have Lorule and Link Between Worlds. Like a lot of Zelda games have a Dark World equivalent, and Breath of the Wild didn't. So
yeah, and I personally love the depths more than the Sky Islands. Sky Islands are fun. They're cool. I have a good time flying from, but I loved just being like, that's way too dark. Oh, Jesus Christ. Here we go.
Admittedly, it did take me a little too long to realize that like every one of the light routes corresponds to a shrine up on the surface. And then once I did find that out, I'm like, oh, I'm going to fill up this entire fucking map.
Yeah, that is the one thing I might go back and like do game wise is like do that and like just beat the shit out of a bunch of monsters because it's a good time. Why not? That is absolutely one of the enemy variety things they do here is that there's a lot of great enemy variety in the people you just run into. There's a lot of great enemy variety in the boss fights, and when you're in the depths, there's if you beat a boss in a temple above, it'll appear in the depths below, and you'll be able to fight it again, which is pretty cool.
Be able to fight it, but it'll actually give you a piece of it that you can fuse to something, which you couldn't in the actual story-based boss fight.
Dude, which I threw onto my Master Sword without thinking. I did to the Rito Temple one, the Air Temple. And that's what I killed Ganon with. It was so powerful.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
It was
ridiculous.
So fucking broken on the Master Sword. I literally quartered Ganon with one hit, and I was like, oh, this fight's gonna be good. I was like, here we go, baby. Spoilers, guys, for this game. If we haven't been
Ganon's
talking
in
about
it.
What do you mean? Ganon's in it. What do you mean? Ganondorf's in this? You fight him? What the fuck? I mean, if you're playing the game, most of the game, it does feel like you're only gonna see Phantom Ganon or
they mix it up,
or the frightening hands, gloom hands. They are. Yeah. I absolutely shit myself the first time they came after me. I was like, "What the fuck is that?" And then I just, which I will say, harkens back to the hands and the zombies. In Ocarina of Time, where you just were like, what the fuck is
Wall
that?
Masters and the fucking Re-Dead.
And it just scares the shit out of you, even though you see it happening, it's coming towards you, and you're just like, fuck! Still gets you every time. Like, I feel like that they captured that here. You're just like, Jesus.
But even little things like adding a bunch of like Gleeoks around. I remember spotting one from the distance. I'm like, what is that King Ghidorah looking motherfucker over there? And it's just like, is that a fucking Gleeok? Like, Zelda 1 Gleeok? Yeah, right? That's cool.
That's cool. And then
the fact that there are different, like, elemental ones, I'm like, okay, this is what you should have done with the Blight Ganons, because making the Blight Ganons the actual boss fight for each Divine Beast was stupid.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been that's something huge improvement from Breath of the Wild is not being like, oh, it's another Blight cannon.
Yeah, the bosses have much more variety. Okay,
Yeah,
that's a segue into. I didn't. All right, I didn't care for the divine beasts in Breath of the Wild. They were very, very repetitive.
Yeah.
And while the temples here are better, they're still not
a huge step in the right direction, and
they're better.
I think they're great.
I would say they're a small step, not a big step.
I see that's
because the problem is this is sort of the disadvantage by making your game so open is that you can't really do the same style of dungeon/temple that you used to do in the old games pre-Breath of the Wild because it doesn't really lend itself to openness like ascending through the ceiling and stuff like that to completely rank the order or sequence of which you're supposed to solve the dungeon.
Which is where my argument for them giving you the dev tools and that being a beautiful thing so you can like do anything you want, it's where it's kind of a double-edged sword because I feel like it's great the rest of the game, but then when you come to these open dungeons, some of these open dungeons can feel kind of easy when you can, especially the fire one that's in the depths. That was I feel like that was absolutely broken. I feel like I did not play that temple the way it wanted me to play it in a great way, in a lot of fun way where I was just like, I'm zipping up into the ceiling, I'm flying around, like I'm creating weird contraptions to fly off the rails, like I was having a good time with the temple. What was I playing it in any way that any, temple or dungeon is supposed to be played in any Legend of Zelda? Probably not.
But then on the same token, you don't want to necessarily limit someone in the same way that like you can't use certain things when you're in the shrines, because then it'll feel like, you're kind of cutting my legs off here because you gave me all these toys to play with. So it's tough, which is why all the temples basically boil down to like, it basically boils down to hit 4 switches and then move on to the boss. Yes,
true. I will say that kind of sucks that they didn't variety that a little bit more. Now, what are the best temples? Let's rate them. I will say the Rito flying temple, the like flying through the sky to get up there to the beast. That was my favorite temple. I would say that was the best one. I would say the weakest goes to not the fire temple, as I just kind of alluded to, but I think it goes even further to the kind of spirit temple that you're doing at the end for what's her name? For Minoru. When you're doing that temple at the end of the game to get Minoru up and get her ready to fight with you, it's kind of a really weak and loosely put together temple. And I by an accident had found the roots for it 20 hours before and not known I was at a temple. I was standing at it and I was kind of not understanding what was going on, but I like activated all the roots for it. So that last temple took me all of fucking 10 minutes. And talk about breaking the game. That was the one where I literally was just like, I'm not going to play this the way they want me to. I'm just going to do whatever I want to get this little arm out of this room, and I did, even breaking out my own Zonai devices to do things, and that's the fun of the game. That is the absolute fun of the game. But I would say the Spirit Temple didn't utilize that fun well. It was just kind of like a, ugh. And then
it also doesn't help that the mech itself is actually pretty lame.
It's cool that as a Gundam guy, I was fucking hype that there was a mech. I was like, oh shit, Link gets a mech. That's great. That she's so damn weak and sucks so much and moves so slow. is so lame. So lame.
Even when you attach stuff to her to make her faster, like you can put a fan on her back
yes,
for her to like move a little faster. But like even when you fuse her arms with very powerful stuff, it's like
the cannon.
You're so lumbering and counterintuitive that you're just not worth it. And it also helps. Like,
she's cool to have as a fighting partner because once you have her and you have all the 4 sages. I don't know if you had all 4 sages on at all times. I, of course, did.
Yeah.
And it was always super
Which
funny.
was a problem.
Yes, it was a problem at the end. Once we had the robot, it became a problem.
No,
before
it was a problem.
It was okay.
It was a problem before that. There needed to be a separate way to just do a quick fire for each of the sage's powers.
Yes.
Having to run up to each one of them to interact with them directly to activate the power got so annoying and chaotic when you're in the middle of a battle with a large crowd and they're all over the fucking place.
Yeah, and why was only Rito, I'm gonna keep calling them the Rito and the Goron guy, they were the only 2 that like snapped to some activity when you were doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you had to run up to the other 2 of them. And you're like, but she's like an attack and he's a defense. I need them both.
Like the fucking...
What are they running around for?
Would get especially annoying because she's all over the place. She's running over here to fight. She's running over here to fight. It's like, get over here so I can activate the power so I can blow up this hive. Stay still.
Stay still. I did enjoy them fighting with you. I thought that was cool. Now, were they utilized right? No. I think that
it could have been mapped to like a wheel or something.
It could have been mapped to something very simple. They literally didn't have to be running around the whole time. It literally could have been like a special attack, like RB brings up wheel, launch them, really, really simple.
Even if you want to have them like running around and doing their own thing, fine, but give me a way to access their power without having to run all the way up to them and interact with them like I'm talking to an NPC.
Now, my one thing is, does this hint towards future DLC where they'll have multiplayer Zelda here? Where you can play Tears of the Kingdom with all your friends playing as the sage? Is what I was thinking playing the game, is I was like, wouldn't it be cool? So that's my thing here, is that Breath of the Wild, there was a lot where I was like, oh, that's kind of stupid. But Tears of the Kingdom made me go several times, okay, this is really cool. Let's go further. Let's take this and go that much further. And I feel like the sages are one example of where you're just like, that could have been cooler. We could have gone further with this, and if we don't in DLC, which is obviously going to come because Breath of the Wild had DLC, you're just kind of like, you're just like, what are we doing here? And but like, I think that upgrading the sages, making them more intuitive would work. And my other thing that I want added, and it's so stupid, Deshaun. No, 2 things. 2 things that I want added, and stops me from giving this game a perfect 10, even though that it is basically for me a 9.5. It's almost a perfect. Is that for some reason there's no fucking fishing in this game, and I know Breath of the Wild didn't have fishing, but like, there's a lot of fish things going on here, and for some reason I can't have a rod and throw it in the water. I have to throw electric stuff into the water to make the fish pop up, and then
there are more than several. I mean, to be fair, like, I don't have the patience for it, so I would do the same thing. Just like, electric choo-choo jelly, all of you die. I'm gonna go grab you. But I get the impudence it's one of those things. Fishing, especially given that there are several like NPC quests. There's like, I need this specific type of fish.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it happens in other games, so it would have been like a nice throwback, and it's one of those things that I loved in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and like, and of course, many of the other Game Boy,
even Twilight Princess
Zelda
had fishing.
Games.
I don't think Skyward Sword had fishing. I know Twilight Princess did.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's an enjoyable little mini game, but like, it seemed to be almost worked into the game, and you're kind of like, okay. And then the other thing that feels left out that is from the rest of the series and just feels like it just doesn't get touched in Breath of the Wild and this, is there's no instruments. Where the fuck are my instruments? Like, literally, there's a whole plot where I gather a whole band and they play music for the rest of the game. One of the earliest quests I did in the game, because I was like, give me them fairies. I want to upgrade them, and I want to have the best clothes. Let's go, baby. And I did that so early. And it felt so weird that there's just no instruments at all in the game. And there's several quests about music and talking about songs and like singing songs. Like NPCs will sing songs to you, and you're kind of like, where is an instrument I can play? I don't know. It just feels missed. I don't feel like it's needed, but it's one of those things that I'm like,
sometimes it's better not to include
game,
it than shoehorning it in just because, well, it's a Zelda, this is what we do.
It's true, but that is kind of, Tears of the Kingdom has a lot of love letters. Like, you know, like they were like, let's just throw all this stuff from the old games as outfits in this game. That will like really pad out the outfits here. But then that's kind of the end of the big love letters to the series, because it's just like, otherwise it is not doing like music weapons. And fishing and some weapons, of course. Yeah, the big Goron sword.
I fucking popped off when I found the big Goron sword. I'm like, what? Hell yeah!
I of course had I have a lot of Legend of Zelda amiibos, so I got all that shit super early and all the outfits. That is the only little problem with the amiibos here, is I feel like it definitely cut down on a lot of my searching for shit, because I was just like, oh, I already got that. I ain't gonna look for that. Like, I ain't gonna search for that outfit. I already got it.
And I remember the other tunics like not being available in Breath of the Wild unless you had amiibo. The only one you could get was the Breath of the Wild one, which is basically the Zelda 1 tunic.
But that I like that they kind of let you find all the amiibo stuff in this game without it. But if you do have it, you get it early, and then for the rest of the game, it just kind of makes you get supplies and food. And
speaking of supplies, I did complain about weapon durability in the first game, which was my biggest like, fuck this is so annoying. A lot of that is circumvented by fusing in this game. And it actually incentivizes, because there are two things that incentivize. One, it doesn't matter because I get to experiment with a different kind of weapon this time.
Yes,
and another thing is that you're supposed to break the rotted weapons to get a pristine one in the depths on those little like statues. You need to break it first.
So it's like there is advantages to just like breaking weapons, like using them and breaking them. I did have a stash of just high level weapons by the time I beat the game. I definitely Breath of the Wild it, where I was like, oh yes, I will keep all of my ancient arrows for the final fight, and then like I defeat Ganon really fast because of the ancient arrows. And here was the same way, where I was like, oh, I'll keep all these super heavy weapons for the final fights, and then I was just like spinning around doing 70 damage to everything, and I was like, but also that was like the fun of this game, where it felt more RPG, where it was just like, okay, I can get these weapons and get things that combine to them to hit crazy damage, so that way I can really outlevel some of these fights that are actually pretty hard. I will congratulate Breath of the Wild was decently hard, but after like 20 hours you were just like, every fight is easy and I can destroy them all. Here the fights don't get easy, they get faster. You get faster at beating things. It took me till beating a lot, I beat a Lionel and I was like, wow, that took forever, and it took most of my health. And then I watched a video online of a guy just absolutely wasting a Lionel in like 15 to 30 seconds, and I was like, oh, so that's how you do it. And for the rest of the game, that was my fight style, was that crazy fucking speed runner online, where I'm just like flipping around, slow-mowing, launching shit tons of stuff, spinning around, launching myself through the air, jumping through the air, just doing everything possible to unleash damage. And like, it absolutely works. And that's actually a lot of fun of this game, is that, sure, a lot of people can say that the combat gets repetitive, but you can get really fucking good at it, and that's the really fun part about it, is you can be like, I can fine tune myself into
I'm gonna blow your mind,
destroying
guys.
machine.
Like, Zelda's combat has never been its strongest attribute.
What are you talking about? Waiting for the Liz Fanos in Ocarina of Time to attack. to attack me is peak gameplay. What are you talking about?
Peak waiting.
Peak waiting.
Like even with Skyward Sword, which did get a little better about it, just because you actually had to think and not just like mash the B button. Yeah, and I appreciate that. But like combat has never been Zelda's like strongest suit.
I think they did a couple things here to unlock that. Was the fusion, but they also added army fighting, which I thought was really a fun addition to this. Is like basically throwing a shit ton of enemies at you with a giant life bar for all the enemies, and you have to take them down. And usually you have some help, but sometimes you run into a place not realizing where you were, and you have to take on a whole army as Link. And definitely feels at moments a little like it took a little bit of influence from Hyrule Warriors for those segments, but in the way that you are fighting in the same Tears of the Kingdom Breath of the Wild way, instead of Hyrule Warriors way, where you're like, swing the sword, 20 people go flying, you know, like you're actually fighting. I really enjoyed those fights. I really enjoyed the big pirate fights, the running through the caves. I thought that was really cool and a nice addition to the combat going on here. Along with giant fights against giant monsters like the Henoixes and the
Gleeoks up on the surface. I mean, even when you have a shitload of hearts, those suckers are tough.
Jesus Christ. And it did take another like Instagram video to find out to like use eyeballs to hit them in the eyeballs, and I was like, oh, and then the Gleeoks were actually pretty easy after that, and I was like, time to hunt these motherfuckers down. I was like, after I figured that out, I was like, I'm gonna go kill these motherfuckers.
There is always the snobbish part of me that's just like, I don't fucking need you TikTokers and Instagram users to tell me how to fucking play this game. The one note that I did take was I did use the air bike. It made air bike with the fucking with a big like bright bloom seed attached to the back made navigating the depths so much easier, just fucking flying through it.
I did love all that stuff. It just inspired you, and that's another fun thing they added here. Is not only are you going through Legend of Zelda, you're doing a really fun, adventure. There's lots to it, lots to find and explore and do. But you also have this great, almost Minecraft level building game going on here. And you can literally watch people online and be like, wow, that's pretty fucking cool. Let's build that, and that was happening to me all the time. And I mean, the bike is an absolute must. If you haven't seen the hover bike, it's perfect for getting around really fast. But like, there's lots of other just like easy contraptions that really work great that I have saved on my auto build, which I do feel like at first, and I feel like a lot of people complained about this because they only played probably 10 hours of this game and then we're like, maybe. Is that at first you think building's kind of tough. You're like, oh, I played Minecraft. Why is this so hard? And you're like, just keep actually working on it. And then at about 30 to 50 hours in, you'll pick up in the depths auto build. Hopefully you'll pick it up by that point. Some people get it far later, but auto build changed your life because it's a little clunky to build. I don't agree.
I picked up auto build like fairly early on.
I think that usually just building with the Ultra Hand is a little clunky, but overall I feel it's very intuitive. I feel like it's very understandable for anybody. Any age range can figure out how to use that to build. Once you have auto build, fuck that. That's all out the window. You could just be like, all right, got my vehicle. Let's go.
Yeah.
And Link is riding around the fucking Hyrule on a lowrider, like you're just like, let's go, baby. It's half the fun of this game is being inspired and building and doing fun things with the weird builds that you can do in this game. And definitely,
which was always going to give the mech in the Spirit Temple a disadvantage. It's just like, oh, people have like built their own fucking mechs that are like way more powerful than this story-based thing.
Oops. Right? You're like, hey, this story-based thing, I can literally take the little Roomba bot and attach a cannon to it, and it's better than you. What is up with that, homie? Like, what's up with that, homie? Like Jesus. Like I don't know if you've seen, you can just take the Roomba, attach 3 cannons to its head, and it will fuck shit up. You know, like you're just like, go, homie, kill them all. Like, do what you got to do.
And the mech is also somewhat undermined because if you did the what's his name, the fucking leader of the bandits, Koga.
Yeah, Koga.
If you do the whole Koga quest in the depths, his boss fight is with a mech that's just like the mech that you get in the Spirit Temple.
Yeah.
So you're just like, oh, so that
he
comes down to
figured out
like
the mech.
Yeah. So it doesn't make
this
this nearly as special.
I did love the Yiga plotline in this, that it was just kind of very like them trying to strike back in the face of an apocalypse, even though it's not really helpful or useful in any way, you know, like, and then you just go around and hand them their ass the whole time.
Yeah,
that's
they're like stuff. They're like the Zelda 2 enemies, except they don't actually serve a purpose, because the whole thing is just like, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to serve our Lord Ganon. In Zelda 2, it's just like, well, yeah, because if Link dies, Ganon gets resurrected. Here, Ganon's already back, so what do you guys do?
Yeah, what do you guys up to?
What do you do other than kiss ass?
I did really love that. I
didn't find, I don't know about you, but I didn't find many of the Yiga clan, like, auto-build, like, blueprints, all that useful.
Not super useful. There was, like, 1 or 2 that I used all the time, that I was like, okay, that is what I'm going to use continuously. But there wasn't really too much, you know, like that I was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. Now, I feel like we were going down your list. Do we have to keep going on that list?
I think that list we've pretty much covered everything, because I think I even had a bullet point that was literally like, the mech is lame.
The mech is lame.
The mech is trash garbage. We talked about maps. We talked about the depths.
Now, my number one thing that is against the DLC expansion argument. Number one thing, and I'll argue this to everybody, is that they basically put an 1.5-hour animated Legend of Zelda Tears of the King movie in this game for free, homie. They put an 1.5 hours of cutscenes when you go around to the different glyphs that are all over the map, and you get basically an 1.5 hours of movie, and it is so good, so well done. It makes me want a Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom movie. I would absolutely watch that. I think they'll fuck that up, but I would absolutely watch a Tears of the Kingdom movie. I think that animated stuff is absolutely worth the ticket of price of admission into this game. It's a great asset to this game because it's one of those things that Breath of the Wild did not do enough of, actual storytelling. And I feel like that's the major strength of this game, is all the stories. Is that you have a main story, you have tons of side stories, you have to report the news with the newspaper, you have to stop the Yiga clan. There's endless stuff to do throughout the game, and they all tell actual stories instead of just being like little fetch questies, you know, like. And I thought that's what's one of the major strengths of this game.
Yeah, I agree. Although when we inevitably get like the Zelda movie, I've always felt like it's a mistake to adapt just one single game.
Yeah, instead of, I feel like it's going to be hard to do, you know, like, because I feel like they definitely want to do a Breath of the Wild or something like that. Or Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah,
you know,
and I would have said this pre Breath of the Wild too. Like, I don't want a Zelda movie that's just adapting Ocarina of Time.
Yeah. But if you don't want that, it's like, that's what's, I think, the strength of the animated parts of this game, is it's just a Tears of the Kingdom movie about, you know, set in the Tears of the Kingdom, all with the animation from Tears of the Kingdom beautifully done.
Yeah, things are just much more fleshed out here, and it also feels way more organic than, like, the memories were kind of underwhelming in the first game.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, like, stuff I like in those, mostly on the Zelda side of things. Like, I love the idea of, like, a Zelda a version of Zelda that's sort of self-aware and almost feels the weight of the entire franchise on her shoulders. Like, holy shit, what the hell, man? Like, this Zelda played the other games. You're like, oh, fuck.
I agree. I do love the British Zelda here. I do love the upgrade on her look here. I think it's actually really awesome. I do love all the outfits in this game, but I will say all my cutscenes, I absolutely, right before the cutscene, changed into the Ocarina of Time outfits every time and was just like standing there as Ocarina of Time Link.
That is one of the better tunics.
Or my absolutely favorite outfit in the entire game was the slippery frog one where you didn't slip on any walls. I was able to max that outfit out so early in the game, maybe 20 hours in, and I wore that everywhere. But his hat was so silly, he was just like, in cutscenes, and I was just like,
given
okay.
like if you don't have any good constructs to fly around with yet early game, and Rivali's Gale's not in this game, so you can't just fucking fly right over anything. So when rain comes, you're just kind of fucked.
Yeah, and there's a long time in the game where I couldn't find rockets. So I feel like they kind of hide them from you in the Sky Islands until you get to that point where you're flying around all the Sky Islands, and then you can get a rocket, and then you can shoot yourself into the sky real easy. But otherwise, there's not many choices to get up a mountain, and a lot of the game was a lot of rain. I will say one of my one complaints about this game is that they did change the environments for a couple of these areas, but they made them cold for a lot of these. A lot of it is cold, and I was kind of sick of cold environments by the end of this game. I was kind of like, I don't want to wear the cold clothes. Stop making me wear the cold clothes. I don't want to wear them. I think they're ugly. I don't want to wear them, but I have to because I'm just like taking health away. And it's from almost half the map if you don't do the Rito Temple almost right away. It basically takes up half the map as winter. And I'm just kind of, that was my one level design complaint here is I think there's a lot of fantastic thing done, a lot of interesting things done. Even we haven't talked about the shrines yet. But I think that I think the snow is just kind of it's too much. It's too much. It's like,
I think that's why it's recommended that you do the Rito one first, which is what I did.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is the one you should probably do first. Now what?
Shrines.
I was wanting to talk about shrines. Yes. So shrines, I will say, feel so much fresher here because before it was just kind of like, oh, it's sort of a small dungeon and you're sort of doing this. Now it feels like they brought in different game designers to work within the confines of Tears of the Kingdom to present you with kind of a small mini game instead. And that's what I feel is so fresh here is there's obviously the tropes, there's where they take everything away from you and you have to beat them, a proving ground test. And there's a lot of there's a lot of silly, just whack the ball over to there. But then there's some really imaginative, shrines that really blow your mind and feel like some other dev has stepped in and created this.
They're actually intuitive puzzles to solve in the shrines this time around.
Yeah, and I appreciate just using the mechanics of the game.
And you needed that because you introduced such fucking broken powers. So you needed to match that up. And sure, a lot of them can be solved with just hey, big bridge, but some of them can't. Some of them you're just
some of you gotta do something. You gotta do some
big
stuff.
Bridge or remembering that you can literally rewind time and use that to your advantage. That's how my friend activated the Spirit Temple stuff way too early because there's the Thunderhead skylines up above. You know how debris is always falling from the sky?
Yes, and you were just
Yep, he hopped on it and used rewind to go all the way up and ended up in that sky island before he was able to actually supposed to be able to access it.
Oh, that's super funny. That's wild.
So he just kind of stumbled head first into all that stuff super early.
Yeah. Oh my god. And that's the fun of Breath of the Wild, and also they were able to transfer it here. Is I felt like some of the great moments in the Breath of the Wild weren't the story being told, but the stories you were telling through your gameplay. Like, I climbed the mountain, I didn't know what was up there, then there's the giant dragon flying around, you know, like, that was such a fun moment in Breath of the Wild for me. I mentioned it many times. And here, you get the same moments all over Tears of the Kingdom, and I feel like they capitalize on that, where it's just like, there's plenty of moments where you're flying around and you're like, I don't think I should be here, and it's kind of like this beautiful, like, oh, kind of unlocking the game early type of moment, as much as you want it to be. But
the shrines which are better here because they require you to like think 4-dimensionally.
Yes, and I think that's what's great about them, is that they are definitely not made by the same people. You can definitely tell there's different mentalities going into this, different thought processes. I think that that's what's really cool here, is that they are absolutely using every bit of the shrine like thought process to make to make fun little games for you to play, you know. Basically it's awesome.
It's to the point where like,
it's absolutely the variety in this game, like, other than the fighting and the gameplay and you know, collecting and exploring, is you can go and solve these really fun puzzles.
You could take the shrine puzzles like independent of the rest of the game and it would make its own puzzle game.
Absolutely. I would play just the shrines as like a Zelda, like, weird puzzle game, you know, like, and I feel like you could with this game, if you didn't want to do any of the stories or anything like that, you really could just stick to the shrines the whole game and just be like, I did all that, you know, like, and then quickly just demolish the fucking temples at the end of the game. But like, you know, like, that would be that's a way you could play this game, and I think that's kind of beautiful. I do really enjoy the aesthetics of this game. I don't know if we kind of talked about that, is that I really do love the kind of like, we'll talk about it with looking at this amiibo, is the kind of like ghost hand, the shrunken hand here as his kind of superpower. Hand. Now, there's always something in a Zelda game that makes this Link special. It makes him do something different, be it turn flat or go back in time. And this one, he gets a fucking ghost hand, and he can do whatever he fucking wants with it. Like, and that's fucking cool, and I kind of love that.
Which is something they repurposed from Breath of the Wild, because you look at concept art for Link in Breath of the Wild, they did toy with him, giving him, like, a prosthetic arm. And they're just like, nah. And then they're like, no, we're doing it now. And it's interesting that slowly the franchise incorporates ideas that were meant for like the much earlier games in the series that they weren't ready for yet. Like back as early as Zelda 1 and Link to the Past, like they wanted to toy with the idea of just like, it was called A Link to the Past because they wanted to make Link a time traveler where he would go to like the past and the future. We're talking like medieval and like futuristic, like cyberpunk style city.
Yeah.
But they're just like, that might be a little much for this game. So what they do instead for the later games is we incorporate things, but we make them just fantasy enough so that it doesn't feel anachronistic.
Yeah.
Like Link is basically running around with a fucking tablet. And we don't question it because it's just like, yeah, but it's all magic-y and shit.
And in this one, it's even crazier because not only is it a tablet and, you know, it takes pictures and everything, but Minoru's been in it the entire time. You're like, what the fuck? What the fuck, pad? What the fuck kind of iPad is this shit? It's been possessed the entire time? Like what the fuck?
It's just like, I have a robot arm. There are literally, like, I remember when Spirit Tracks came out, and people were like, it feels weird for a train to be in a Zelda game. It just seems like it's too far, it's too modern. And in this one, you're fucking making cars and tanks and shit, and you don't question it.
Right? You're just like, nah, it works. We can make it all work. Now, my absolute thing about this game also is not only the aesthetic is so beautiful, the fun of everything, the big everything floating, everything underground, the way the music flows through everything, and it feels so masterful and flawless, and reason why you shouldn't be mad about it, even if you think it's a expansion or a DLC, is that it's done to a fine tune, even if it is some sort of expansion or DLC if you think of it that way. You're like, oh, is it perfect? Is it finally mastercrafted? Because I think one of the major things that we talked about, first things first, that was, I feel, fine crafted from Breath of the Wild was, you said it earlier, Master Sword was kind of weak in not only narratively, but also just in gameplay for Breath of the Wild. Now, Tears of the Kingdom, they work it into the entire story. It drives
the shittiest Master Sword in the series a plot point.
And and you're just like, oh, hell yeah. And then literally when you get it later on, it's one of the most epic scenes this year in games. Absolutely. I love riding on Zelda Dragon's head, pulling it out. It's so epic and amazing. And that's what I feel is also the fun of this game. I'm saying aesthetic, but I didn't bring up the weird anime aesthetic that has been really leaned into here. Is that,
hey kids, you like Castle in the Sky?
Yeah, if you like Castle in the Sky, which I actually watched for the first time while I was playing this game. Deshaun, you've seen it, right? Of course,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. I watched it for the first time, and it was so funny playing this game and then seeing this movie for the first time, because I'm like, damn, guys, you guys were blatant as fuck. You guys were blatant as shit. You weren't even like, wow, this is such a fun movie, we should just kind of copy it. They were just like, damn, love you, Castle in the Sky. Here, we're gonna just copy the shit out of this. And you're like, fair, this movie's beautiful. Yeah, I love it.
Like, between like that, the Castle in the Sky stuff, movie. All the love dragon stuff, like,
not
like
only but in the animation, all the animation is very, in those animated segments I was talking about earlier, is very anime, especially the fights they have with Rimuru and Ganondorf, where they're like punching each other and like becoming a shrine, and like the last second move, like their Goku versus Frieza, you know, like there's lots of like little things that are like nods to other anime properties that you're like, holy shit, guys. Like, I love that you leaned into this anime aesthetic and it like works so well here. That's why I don't mind the mech, as it feels even more like we're leaning into the anime feel. Is just like, sure, it's weak and it's stupid.
I don't mind the mech's inclusion. I just wish it was more useful.
I do wish it was more useful. They do kind of gang stomp the shit. It's like the JoJo meme when you have all the sages out, they just gang stomp the shit out of certain characters. Like when you run up to an enemy, it's all of a sudden 4 stages just beating the fuck out of them while I'm over there like picking up a mushroom. I'm like, and they're like,
the final, and that by extension with that, the final fight with Ganon is so fucking good. It's so goddamn fun. Like,
talk about an improvement from Breath of the Wild. Talk about an improvement.
The dragon fight at the end is also cool. It is a little too similar to the Rito temple boss fight in places.
But that fight is my favorite fight in the game, so I don't mind. Like, I love that fight.
Like,
that's my favorite fight in the game. Not only music-wise, but it's just a
little
time.
Too similar, but I actually preferred the just like one-on-one sword fight in the depths with them. It's just so fucking anime and ridiculous.
Yeah, right.
And just the aesthetic as he becomes more and more corrupted. I'm like, this is so cool.
Basically just calling him the Demon King. So this game is just, I woke up in another world and have to defeat the Demon King. Like, you're like, aha, is Zelda an isekai, my friends? Like, maybe. Like, just kidding. Don't be mad, everybody. It's okay. It's not an isekai.
Also, I'm so glad these fucking games have
the Demon King.
I'm so glad these games have voice acting now. I've always loved Matt Mercer as a voice actor, and of course as a DM. If you've ever watched like Critical Role or him play on other stuff, I was so hyped when they announced that he was voicing Ganon. I'm like, oh,
he's so fucking good as him, dude. But they do the one weird animation moment comes with the Ganon smile. I don't know, where his face is like, you're just like, oh Lord. But it is amazing. So I'll keep it. You know, like, well, it's a weird animation moment, but it also is memeable and amazing. So we'll keep it. We'll let it fly. Now, what do you think, Deshaun? Is there anything else you want to say about Tears of the Kingdom? I think it's a great improvement. I think there's stuff that could have been done better. I think there's dreams for the future. But overall, I think this is the most fun I've had with the game all year long. And I played Elden Ring this year, and I loved Elden Ring. I had more fun with this game.
Like, I'm sort of there, too.
Mostly because it's not as depressing as Elden Ring.
As someone who,
every quest in Elden Ring is depressing. Here, it's like joy.
As someone who liked Breath of the Wild, but didn't, froth over it the entire time like a lot of people did, this, to me, is a better experience.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things
where, much better experience.
If that first game was so perfect, then why is this so much better? Immediately, by just changing little stuff that made the first one annoying. Right. And again, I still have those concerns with moving on with the open world formula from here on out. You're gonna have to find more creative ways to mix it up, especially as far as dungeon/temple design is concerned.
Yeah.
And you don't want to fall into making the same thing over and over again. That's why I said switch locations. Maybe we can find a way to make the temples a little more in depth.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing is, I feel like I need the temples don't need to be deep. They never were. Temples don't have to be deep, but they do have to offer variety. And I feel like that's my criticism with here is that you're right. They're 4 switches, and that's the end of them for all 5. And you're just kind of that's not what I want. I want a little bit more.
I also hope we'll
but
make
that's like
room.
being what a masterpiece. I want this to be better. That's my problem. Is I'm this is wonderful. I have such a good time, but I do want that little bit more.
I also hope we'll still make room for top-down Zelda games as little side projects, because I don't want top-down Zelda games to just go away.
No, absolutely. I hope that we can get some love project. I know it's top-down Zelda.
Because the Switch is in this weird place where it's your new home console, but it's also portable. It doesn't feel as easy to be well, this is the main Wii U Zelda game, and then we can do a top-down one on the 3DS. Yes. We don't have the 3DS anymore.
No. So, but I mean, they were remaking Zeldas, and that was kind of filling that itch. And I'm hoping that we'll get a couple more of those. I do love that we can play a bunch of Zeldas on if you have the Nintendo Switch Pass, and you get all these Zelda games now. Over 12 Zelda games just on that pass, and I think that's fucking something to say.
Honestly surprised that on the 3DS they didn't take what they had learned from remaking Ocarina and Majora's and just make... I'm surprised they didn't make their own original Ocarina style Zelda game on the 3DS. Given that they went out of their way to remake Ocarina and Majora's, and that's usually the thing. It's we remake the old one, so maybe we can give you a third.
Yeah, but they're not Game Freak, so they're not as transparent with development wise as
I mean, to be fair, instead we got a Link Between Worlds. That's not a bad compromise either. That shit's still one of my...
No, it ain't.
That's probably my second favorite still.
It's
Link Between Worlds is so fucking good.
It's so good. It's so good. I will say, so where do you rate this on your Legend of Zelda list? Because that's hard for me, because I, of course, Ocarina of Time holds a place in my heart. And before I would say that Ocarina of Time still, for me, beat Breath of the Wild, even though Breath of the Wild, I think, is a fantastic game. I think now, though, Tears of the Kingdom might be one of my favorite Zelda games of all time. It's up there. I don't know if it beats Ocarina of Time just love-wise, but it's in the top 5.
I have a soft spot for Ocarina too. That was my first Zelda game. I didn't play A Link to the Past until it got ported to the GBA. So I got into the top-down ones later.
And Majora's Mask is fantastic, and of course I have to include...
Plus, I think, in my opinion, I think Majora's Mask is the better game. It's just more deep, and it's also a lot more challenging.
Yeah, I love the Rod of Ages and Seasons. Those two games are some of my favorite Zelda games.
It's for the edgelord in me, Majora's Mask is so fucking grim.
Grim.
It's just so dark and weird.
I do like that we lead into a little bit darkness here in Tears of the Kingdom.
Wind Waker has consistently been my favorite.
It's pretty great. It's a lot of fun. I don't put it in my top 5, but it is pretty great. I do love it.
So it's Wind Waker, Link Between Worlds, maybe Majora's Mask after that. After that, maybe this? I don't know.
Because for me, I think it's got to be Ocarina of Time, and then maybe this. Because this is absolutely the Zelda game I've put the most hours into, other than Ocarina of Time. So because of how many times I've played Ocarina of Time. But that's okay. But
a game of replay value. I mean,
yeah, crazy. Now, Deshaun, we don't do ratings here, but we do on the Warp Shelf. Pre-order it, own it, buy it on sale, and nope is how we rate movies. Now, how would you rate Tears of the Kingdom? Because I did pre-order it, so it falls under that for me. What would you say?
I didn't pre-order it just because I was spending money on other things.
Yeah,
it didn't help that that Candlelight Zelda concert that I went to was literally the day before the game came out.
Oh, perfect.
So
timing.
It's just like, I'm not going to get it immediately. I'll wait a week or two. And then I got so pumped up by going to that fucking Candlelight concert. It's just like, yeah, I need it. Yeah. So I immediately was just like, pick up.
Yeah.
As far as a game that's worth its full price, absolutely. Yes. Because there's so much game in this game.
Yeah, so much game in this game. And that is probably the best review you can have as a gamer.
I know people who for
people who spend a lot of money on games, a game that's a lot of game is great.
Yeah, and that's sort of the appeal. There are people who are don't necessarily want to play numerous games, but you get that one time sink game that takes them forever. Mm-hmm. I know people who still play Breath of the Wild who still haven't finished it because it's just they just turn it into this endless thing.
True.
Oh, this is the game that I'm gonna play. In the same way that every time an Elder Scrolls game comes out, this is my game for this whole console generation. This is just what I'm gonna play.
This is it. It's true. It's kind of like Animal Crossing people. They're like, that is it. That's my reason for the Switch. And I feel like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are those type of games too, where you're like, this is the reason for my Switch. And I would say, I know Breath of the Wild had 1-to-1 on console to game retention, and I feel like Tears of the Kingdom deserves the same. It's totally worth it. Absolutely a must play if you own the Switch. If you own the Switch, what are you doing? Buy it now. Fucking
given the
Tears
gap
of the Kingdom, baby.
Between Breath and Tears, I doubt we'll get another major Zelda game on this console.
No, we should have a new console next year.
Because given the development time of this, how long this took, by the time we would roll around, we'd probably be into whatever the Switch's successor is.
Yeah, and I think that's coming. I think they already kind of confirmed it's coming next year. We're finally getting a sequel.
We'll see.
We'll see. It's one of those things that
sounded a lot like all the Switch Pro conversations you had with me before.
Exactly. If you've listened to this podcast, we've said that a billion times. And right now, I have my Steam Deck, which you can play pretty much anything. So I'm not exactly going. This was my reason to pick the Switch back up since the Steam Deck. I literally wasn't playing it because I have my Steam Deck, and I was back to playing my Switch all the time.
Hey, congratulations, you grew up.
Which fucked me up because, of course, the buttons were swapped on Nintendo to Steam Deck, and you're like, that fucked me up every time I switch
Nintendo,
systems.
The Switch has always been my secondary console. My PS4 and now PS5 is my main guy.
Yep, and now my main console is now the Steam Deck, and my backup's the Switch.
Although once that WarioWare game comes out, I'm gonna go nuts on that.
Exactly, I am excited for a couple things, and I still want to play that Advanced War remake. I still haven't sunk enough time into.
Yeah,
so I still haven't go back to my Switch.
I still haven't played Scarlet and Violet, so
yeah, me neither. I was the other day, I was saying to Ween of Ape Arcade, I was like, anytime you want me to borrow Pokemon, I'll borrow it. And she was like, yeah, of course you can borrow it. I don't want to play it. I was like, cool. That's a good sign off on that game. Yep. But guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Thank you for listening to our review of Tears of the Kingdom. We don't often do game reviews, so I hope that you enjoy this. And if you want more, please let us know so we can try to play some games at the same time. Now that I got the Steam Deck, we actually can. It doesn't have to be just Switch games. But that's if I'm terrible procrastinator, so.
That is another thing.
That is another thing. But guys, thank you so much for supporting the podcast. Hit those diddly doos down below to make the algorithm move around. But if you're looking for us anywhere, we're on every podcast platform. Pretty much anything you could think of, we're on it. But if you want to see our beautiful faces, you're watching on YouTube. And you can subscribe down below on the Galaxy of Geek YouTube and support us doing more content here. And guys, we got more AFI Top 100 coming up. We have a lot of episodes in the pipeline. We got some current movies coming up soon, so we got some things that we're going to be talking about in future episodes. And be sure to check out the false starts that are our shorts that are basically me and Deshaun have to test record before we record, and we always try to do some funny like intro thing. So that wouldn't work for an actual show. So go check those out and check and let us know because we have a lot coming forward. Of course, we're gonna be talking about that Scott Pilgrim show as soon as it drops, because that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my goddamn life.
Fucking day one, baby.
Day one, baby. We storming that fucking show. Shit. Now, I'm glad
November
it's on
11th.
Netflix.
I gotta see if that's actually like on a work day.
You're like, I need to take it off.
November.
I'm feeling
Saturday.
sick.
Saturday, perfect.
Oh, good. We're good. We're safe. We're safe. Now, guys, if you want to check out our personal social medias, I am Yep Frank or Yep Gundam on Instagram and pretty much everywhere else. I've gotten off of X, and so has Galaxy Geek. We just don't kind of. I don't want to be on there. It seems bad. It's kind of a cesspool at the moment. It was a cesspool before. It's gotten worse. Yeah, it's gotten worse.
Twitter's been a fucking shit show for like a decade.
Yeah, you're like, oh, it got worse. So it was time to leave. But we're pretty much everywhere else as Yep Frank or Yep Gundam.
And I am Mod Karika pretty much everywhere.
And guys, thank you so much for supporting the show, for listening to us talk about our favorite things and some of our not favorite things. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.
We'll see you next time.